மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. Thank you.
A5 is very reasonable here, but also this move queen c7 is quite interesting here, and sets up some ideas to attack this pawn on c5. Going back to bishop e5 here, e6. One other option we could look at is queen g4, which can be pretty annoying to face if you not familiar with it. We saw this similar idea in the previous chapter. Here, white is of course targeting g7, which doesn't allow us to regain on c5, but we can borrow the same exact idea that we used in the last chapter here by playing h5. So this is trying to chase the queen off the board, and also try to play queen a5 check here without allowing white to defend with b4, as the queen on g4 is protecting that square. So how the line runs here, how the most popular continuation runs, it's a little unusual. Bishop c6, pawn c6, and now queen a4. So a little bit of unusual queen swing. But not much to really memorize here. Again, this looks like a very artificial try from white. He's giving up his bishop, potentially will be in trouble because of future bishop a6, swinging his queen all around the board. And just like queen c7 here, get the queen to attack e5, defend c6, bishop c5 is of course threatened. And after bishop e3, knight h6, preparing ideas of knight f5 or knight g4. I think black has a very, very fine position here. Of course, white is always in danger. If he loses back his pawn, which is very likely, he's just going to be positionally worse. So we can move past that. And right, before we go on to knight f3, which is going to be what our main focus is, I should also mention the option of a3. Now, we spent quite a bit of time in the previous chapter looking at this move after e6, and surprisingly, it's also possible to play after knight c6. It has been gaining traction. Again, all a3 approaches in this variation are sort of becoming more and more popular. It's like the latest thing, and since it's a new variation, people are dying out to try out these new lines. And like I said, they've actually been scoring pretty well for white because the fertile ground black hasn't really been able to establish the main roads. But what's surprising that it's possible to play a3 here is that the e5 pawn is hanging. So I'm going to have a brief look at playing knight takes e5 here, but honestly I don't mind just playing e6 in this position, which is going to transpose back into the previous chapter. So even if you don't want to play e6 but prefer knight c6, I recommend you go back to the e6 chapter and watch the last segment of those videos, and to see how I aim to deal with this a3 approach. And it's quite an aggressive approach involving an early f6, so lots of active play there. But white's idea here, oh, and I should mention, by the way, after e6, if white plays b4, which looks consistent, a3 before, and he just wants to gambit this pawn to get this open diagonal, well, here we can actually play the precise a5, and now this move is big trouble for white because his center, his queen side is just falling apart. After b5, knight e5, now c5 is hanging, not easy to protect, so it is a surefire transposition. But white's idea here is after we go knight takes e5, he's perfectly fine gambiting that pawn because he wants to win some tempi for development. Ideally, he wants to put that bishop on b2, of course, where it will have a very influential diagonal. And there's been some games in this line, not a lot, but it's developing. White has two options here, bishop b5 or b4. Again, the play here is kind of weird. It's sort of like a computer-generated line, meaning that the play here is heavily influenced by engines. So I can have a quick look. Here, after bishop b5, I like the move bishop to d7, offering white this pawn on d5, playing a sort of a gambit. And if white accepts it, which it has been played in a couple of games, I believe is the best move. Now we're going to go queen c7, bishop takes d7, knight d7, trying to regain this pawn on c5. White really should play b4 here, I think. There was a game where he played knight f3, but after e6, bishop c5, knight f6, black has no problems. We're even a little bit ahead in development. After b4, this position is very fresh, has been reached once in a Grandmaster game, so I don't really want to spend a lot of time in it. As I mentioned, my main recommendation is to even avoid taking this pawn. But the game continued, knight f6. Now white played this really interesting move, queen b3, setting a trap. The trap was if queen e5, knight e2, queen a1, then knight ec3, and now bishop b2 traps the queen. But we don't have to take that rook here. Instead, I like the move b6 here. It can be an interesting try. The point here is that after white takes, which he really should, otherwise we'll just regain that pawn with the development edge. The idea here is after white takes, knight takes, we're down a pawn, but as we've seen already in these variations, that we were looking for other factors to compensate. So, for example, here this knight can go to c4, which is a pretty juicy outpost. Rook c8 ideas, a5 even, and this position could be explored further. Just a suggestion that I saw that I have actually, and it's a possible way to play. Again, these positions are completely unexplored, so it's quite difficult navigating them without any practical experience so far. But maybe this is a road to examine if the games pick up here. So yeah, to round up a3 here, other white options after knight e5. Of course, the main way to play for white is b4. It's very consistent. He wants to put his bishop on b2, and I guess this move sort of, and black is establishing the move g6 as the as sort of the de facto idea here, to put this bishop on g7, counteract the opponent's bishop. So white goes bishop b5 check. The idea is, of course, to try to get us to play knight c6 to get this tempo with bishop b2. So we're going to play the same idea. We're going to play a sacrifice, bishop d7, giving up this pawn on d5, queen d5, bishop b5, queen e5, knight f6, knight c3, bishop c6. This position has been reached several times. Knight f3, bishop g7. Interesting position, pretty complicated. White is obviously up a pawn, but black has the two bishops, particularly both of them are in the long diagonals, which is quite an influential spot for them. And the plan here is to try to utilize this powerful bishop. There's ideas of knight e4, tactical ideas, and in general, we just want to get castled, of course. And then we also want to strike at these pawns here. So ideas like a5 and in particular b6 are very much in play here. Again, not relatively, just a pretty very unexplored position here that could use more testing. Again, not really sure which way the play would go. I think white can likely fend off black's initiative here with very precise play. But in practice, I don't mind taking this position again. I like the bishops on the long diagonals. The ideas of b6, a5 are easy to follow. And all these tactical ideas of knight e5, knight e4. So this could be something worthwhile to examine. Again, I should stress that I personally think e6 is the best way to go. But, you know, knight e5, pretty fresh line. Maybe in the next couple of years, black will establish some well-analyzed paths there, and it's useful to have a starting point. So now that we've ended the discussion about bishop b5 and a3, we can move to the modern main line of knight f3. So maybe it looks a little bit counterintuitive because this allows us to play bishop g4, which we will happily do. And this will, of course, was our whole plan because we didn't play e6. We want to get this bishop out. We put pressure on the e5 pawn. Looks all great for black. And this actually can be all great for black because our pieces are getting very active here. But with best play, white also has his own ideas here. Now, actually, I believe the real reason this variation is very popular nowadays for white, or very critical, and white players have started placing their bets on this, is because of this move c3, which looks like a unassuming move, but we've seen this move many times in these variations. White really just wants to play b4 at an opportune moment, but also opens up tactics for this queen to come out to a4. For example, here if black takes knight e5, it's a big blunder because after knight e5, bishop d1, bishop b5, black is just losing everything after having to give up the queen. But before white didn't play c3, white was playing this move bishop b5, and black players realized how to deal with this move, and then this is all. This variation isn't played anymore, and the focus shifts to c3. But I can quickly show here why this move isn't played much anymore. But this is a move that you can actually face quite often because many players will just think this is a natural idea, pin the knight, defend e5, develop. What more can you ask for? After the precise queen a5 check, white's knight is lured to c3, which is a problem for him because he loses that possibility of playing ideas like c3 and b4. So this is an important achievement for us. Now e6 puts pressure on the c5 pawn, so white goes bishop e3, knight goes to e7, very typical reaction. We're about to go knight f5, a3, and now the aggressive castle's locked. So every move black is just developing. Now the pawn on e5 is actually hanging. White consistently plays b4, breaking that pin, defending c5. And a very important move here is bishop to f3, taking advantage of this pin here. If white goes queen f3, obviously it's a mistake because of knight b4. So he has to go pawn takes f3, queen c7, pawn is hanging. So f4, or sorry, not f4 rather, bishop takes c6. Knight takes c6, so white's idea is he wants to distract his knight from the f5 square, but no problem for us. Now e5 is hanging as well as d4, and again, this is a typical situation. White is up a pawn, but has gone to quite the lengths to even achieve this point. Of course, his structure is completely broken up on the king side. The queen side is also damaged because of these pawns walking up the board. So for in this position, white has two options. But I'll show you the main idea for black here. It's already quite a good position for black. So white can go bishop d4, bishop f4. Let's say bishop d4 here. Now key move is a6, stopping, of course, the knight coming to d6. Pawn on e5 is hanging, so f4. And now a really nice option we've actually already seen earlier in the ZVD, g5 takes h6. So blowing up the king side, getting these pieces ready to come out. Bishop g7 can be used to pick up this pawn. and this white king is really having a problem getting any safety. So this position is already better for black here. And another option is bishop f4, which can prevent g5, but after, again, a6, stopping knight b5, the pawn on e5 is vulnerable, and also f6 is a worry. So there was a game where white played bishop g3, and now black played g5 anyway, and was ready to play h5, h4. So a very, very promising position. Bishop g7, of course, also on the cards. So this is actually all pretty forced. After, if we go back here, knight f3, bishop g4, bishop b5, there's not really that many deviations here. e6, the pawn is hanging, bishop e3, knight e7, knight f5 is a problem. White has to act fast with a3. So of course, it's nice intermezzo, bishop f3, queen c7, bishop c6. Yeah, so this is a pretty straightforward way to deal with this variation. So now we're finally, going to wrap up this whole knight c6 saga by looking at c3, which is the critical move here, preparing queen a4 ideas, preparing b4 ideas, and just a good move in general. So as I mentioned, knight e5 here would be a terrible mistake. So instead, we're going to play the move e6. e6 here is, of course, a very natural move, getting ready to try to recapture the pawn, and also getting ready to continue our development, for example, knight e7. So white here has a choice how to defend this pawn. Of course, b4 is a very consistent move with c3, in my opinion, so it will make it the main line. But first, we'll also have a look at the move bishop to e3. And here I propose a simple move to deal with this. Again, a slightly rarer move, but very logical, a6. So the idea of this move is that actually the e5 pawn is still poisoned, because white can play queen a4 check, and, well, if we block with a knight, the bishop on g4 hangs, so we have to try queen d7, or not have to, but let's say we do that. Now, bishop to b5, and because of this pin, we have to go knight c6, and of course, queen takes g4. So the move a6 is just a useful move, prevent any of this bishop b5 stuff, and now we're actually threatening to get the e5 pawn back. So in this variation, white is actually not very concerned with holding on to his pawns here, and in general he just wants to get a concession from us. So it's sort of like a reverse situation. Generally we want to get concessions from white. If he wants to have his extra pawn, well, here white is saying, okay, you can have the pawn back, but give me some of the concessions. And the concession that white is mostly going for here is after knight d2, knight e5, bishop e2, we can see white is starting to get ahead in development, and also he's commonly trying to get this bishop, because there's always queen a4 check ideas. He could play h3, so he kind of wants to get a two bishop advantage and a queenside initiative, hopefully, and pushing a b4, c4, and of course if the position opens up, it should be quite favorable for white's bishops. So here I like this move knight c6, which I've seen was played in the game by some grandmasters, and the reason that I like this move as opposed to trading on f3 is because these knights on d2 and f3 are sort of duplicate knights. They're sort of trying to do the same job. Meanwhile, the knight on c6 is very useful in patrolling the center here, and also we're behind in development, so I don't want to really trade our developed pieces. Instead, I want to keep them on the board. So a game here continued, and a very instructive example here was queen a4, typical plan, putting pressure on the diagonal, attacking the bishop, knight f6, dealing with the threat to the bishop quite easily. Now h3, bishop takes f3, and bishop takes f3. So this is a common situation for this variation I mentioned. White gets the bishop pair, and he's going for some queenside activity. But black is very, very solid. Of course, we have the central pawn majority, and also our pawns are primarily on light squares, which should make it okay for now, as we are able to combat white's light square bishop. The following game, I think, is very instructive. Black plays knight d7, targeting the pawn on c5, potentially preparing knight e5, and putting white in a situation. Now, white played knight b3 in the game. If he plays b4, which is very natural, now he has to worry about a move like a5, and he's starting to create queenside targets. So that's why I guess he preferred knight b3. Bishop e7 was played, castles, and now a very nice move, bishop g5. This is a multi-purpose move. First of all, white has the two bishops, so it's logical to get one of them off the board. And second of all, this pawn on c5 is going to be more of a problem here to defend. In the game, what happened was white traded off on g5, queen takes g5, and again, as I already mentioned, the pawns and light squares, we've successfully sort of blockaded this bishop on f3, and the knights actually like this position quite a bit. We can jump around to quite a bit of squares here, and of course the strong center gives us good prospects for the future. Now, in this game, white played very aggressively with c4, again, trying to blow open the position, make sure that bishop on f3 is active, but queen f4 was played, a nice move, putting pressure on the center, pinning this pawn. Bishop e2 was played to support it, and after the simple castles, rook e1, black was already taking over after
மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. தேங்க்யூ.